Okay, good morning. Welcome to Yin. We will get started on our mats today. I just talked with the live stream group about having props. If you have blocks, blankets, whatever you use for yoga, grab it. A pillow is also really nice. Maybe something to cover your eyes in Savasana. And if you're practicing in a cooler area, your body temperature is going to go down with this practice. So you may want a light layer nearby. But I'll leave that to you to figure out. So to get started today, let's come to butterfly. So soles of the feet together, knees apart. And we want to keep this easy. So we're not going for the tightest pose. Tighter would mean that the soles of the feet are coming in close to the body. You want to move the feet a little bit farther away from you. And the reason for that is with yin, we hold the poses a lot longer, which means we need to put less effort into them. So try to come into the pose maybe halfway, whatever that means for you. So you could even start with it really tight with the feet in close to the body and then start to back it out to whatever halfway feels like. And then you can start to shift side to side a couple of times so you feel like the sit bones are even on the mat. You can grab onto the shins, whatever's right there. So don't feel like you need to hinge forward. Just keep the chest upright, close the eyes, sit up tall. So lengthen up through the crown of the head. The tip of the nose points straight forward. And just start to take a deeper breath in through the nose. Back out through the mouth. Softly let that go. Deep breath in through the nose. Fill all the way up. Slow breath back out through the mouth. Last one like that. Big breath in. Slow exhale back out through the mouth. This time, breathe in through the nose and back out through the nose. So close the mouth. Stay with this breath. Deeply in through the nose. And then release the air back out through the nose. And as you stay with this breath, you'll start to notice things start to slow down. So the mind starts to calm. And maybe the swirl of thoughts or whatever you have going on in your head starts to slowly move to the side. So you have more mental space for your practice. You're setting time aside for yourself. So see if you can keep your thoughts on your mat. And the easiest way to do that is to just think about your mat. So what's touching the mat? Edges, the outer edges of the feet, the hips. And that's probably it. You can let those touch points get a little heavier. And start to soften the face. So smoothing out the forehead, widening the space between the eyebrows, and letting the eyes just be softly closed. You're not squeezing them shut. So you can stay right where you are. You're already in a hip opening. If you want to take it a little bit deeper, you could start to hinge forward, but remember we're keeping this really soft and gentle. We actually don't really care about form with this practice. So rounding the spine is totally fine. So as you close the eyes, just feel your way into it. Only go part of the way. Stay way away from your edge with this. And the reason for that is you want to leave some space for the body to pull you into the pose a little bit deeper if it wants to, as it releases. And it's not something you really need to think about. It'll just naturally happen as the body starts to accept the shape and the hips begin to open a little bit more. And the hips are such a tight spot in the body. So we spend a little extra time here. Sending the breath to the hips. And with yin, we tend to stay in the same area of the body. So we're in the hips now. We'll stay with the hips for a little while before we move on to another area in the body. So you have plenty of time here. Find some ease and a sense of surrender into the pose. So less effort, just kind of falling deeper in. And we'll start to come back up. Take your time, definitely moving slow with the transitions. And then use the hands to the outer knees to just help them back together. So you're not using the inner thighs to do that. And then from here, you'll extend the left leg out to the side and bring the sole of the right foot just kind of center with the body. So the toes point forward. So it's half of the shape that we did before, half butterfly. So as you point those left toes up, looking straight forward, sit up as tall as you can. Maybe start to walk the hands forward. Just go part of the way in here. So you're just folding forward with this half butterfly shape. Close the eyes, let the head and the neck go, staying in the hips, staying with the breath. So you get so much more out of these poses if you can stay with that same breath that we started with, in and out through the nose, up and down the back of the throat. And that can be a tougher part of yoga, is linking the breath with the movement. But in yin and slower practices, it is a little easier to stay with the breath as we try to make more space and freedom in the body. And that all helps us with all the other activity that we're doing, or maybe the activity that we're gearing up for, trying to be ready for. And start to walk the hands back in, coming back up to center. And then we'll use the hands to move the legs again. So grab onto the back of the left thigh, bring it in. Right leg comes out, not as wide as you can go. Left toes point straight forward, and you're trying to get the foot about center. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then sitting up tall, slowly start to fold back in. So this is a different hip, which might be more tight or open, depending on how you're feeling. So just don't feel like you have to go in the same exact spot to start. So feel your way into it. Make sure you're way away from your edge. Maybe close the eyes if you find that comforting, or just keep the eyes half open. Try to focus on one spot on the mat. Focus on the breath again. And what you start to find is when you fall into the pose, it's almost like falling into the perfect night of rest. When you are that right amount of tired, when you get into bed and you close your eyes and you start falling into sleep. That's how we kind of want to feel when we come into these poses, is just gently working our way into them. And you'll start to walk the hands back in, making your way back up to seated, grabbing onto the back of the right thigh, bring that foot in. So now we'll bring the soles of the feet wide. So if you're on a mat, just wider than hip width distance, bring the hands back behind you. So you're leaning back and you'll just move the knees side to side like windshield wipers. So this is a really nice way to transition out of the hips from pose to pose. We were in those poses for quite a while. So we just get a little bit of movement that's still gentle and easy as a counter before we continue on. And you'll come back up to seated. So this time we'll come into square pose, also known as Tsukasana. So bring the left shin in front of the right. And what you're trying to do is cross at mid shin. So if you feel like your feet are way back and the knees are going forward, bring the feet more forward until you can point the toes forward. And you're trying to stack the ankles and the knees as best you can. It doesn't have to be perfect. And then maybe you shift side to side again so you feel even on the sit bones. Or you could just lift yourself up the tiniest bit and then set the hips back down. That's also a nice way to kind of align the spine. And we'll come to a gentle twist. So open the chest up to the left. You can grab the shin in front of you with the right hand, and then maybe the fingertips come back behind you or off to the side. You're sitting up tall, but it's a gentle twist. So it's not as deep as you can go. You could even close the eyes here and start to breathe into it. So getting into the spine a little bit before we continue on with the hips. So we won't be here for long. Stay way away from your edge. So it's halfway into a full twist, whatever that means for your body. You'll start to come back to center, just with the torso, leave the legs the way that they are, and we'll come right into the other side. So left hand on that left shin or wherever is comfortable. Right hand comes out to the side or maybe back behind you a little bit, and you're just twisting in the opposite direction. Try not to go as deep as you possibly can. Sit up tall, but it doesn't have to be the longest spine. Maybe the eyes close. And as you breathe In and out through the nose, just feeling the breath move up and down the back of the throat. So you are making a sound with the breath. It should feel like, or should sound like an ocean wave coming from the back of the throat. Something you can hear. But if someone were in another room, they shouldn't be able to hear it. That would be a little strong and might dry out the back of the throat. And we'll start to come back to center. So 2 options with this next hip opening. Option A, you could start to fold forward and come into your hip opening this way. Option B, you could lie back. So keeping the legs in the same shape, you'll have to lift the hips and it's like you're scooting the glutes forward toward the feet, come down onto the forearms, see if that feels okay. And then you can come down onto your back, arms out to the side. And it's definitely a different hip opening, just something to experiment with. If you're uncomfortable, the way you come out is the way you come in. So back up onto the forearms, back up onto the hands, come back to seated, and then you just fold forward and stay there for your hip opening. So you can try either one or try both and see which one feels better to you. If you come onto your back and it feels okay, but it's not quite right, you might need to lift the hips up and use the hands to manually move the glutes toward the feet and then lie back down again, especially if there's any tenderness in the lower back. So this can be a pretty intense pose. You're welcome to come out of it whenever you need to. But we did a whole lot of hip opening to get here. So see if you can stay here without any increase in heart rate, still keeping the breath calm, even if you're folding forward or lying back. If you're on your back, you can reach the arms overhead, almost like you're coming into a stretch, and then clasp opposite elbows. So the chest starts to fall open. And if you can't reach the elbows, it's not a big deal, forearms or wherever is comfortable. Eyes can be closed or softly open. Breathing in and out through the nose. Yin is probably one of my favorite styles of yoga to practice and also to teach. Even though I really love the athletic, sweaty flows, this one just gets so much deeper into the body. Even though you're going slower, you're not working up to a sweat. You also feel the effects of the mind calming down, the nervous system resetting, and tapping into that parasympathetic nervous system, which is a place where healing happens. And with the way we live our lives, it's really common to not even get into the parasympathetic nervous system for days, maybe even longer than that. And that's what helps us lower our cortisol, and balance our emotions. And this practice just always feels like real self-care. So if you're on your back and you have the forearms crossed, remember which one's on top so that when we switch sides, you switch with that too. If you're on your back, you'll start to bring the arms down by the sides, come up onto the forearms, and slowly coming up onto the hands. If you're folding forward, you'll just come back up to seated. And then from here, hands back behind you, no matter where you are, separate the feet wide and definitely do those windshield wipers going side to side. You might feel a big difference in one hip versus the other. That's okay. We were there for quite a while. That was definitely a longer hold. And then we'll switch sides. So now the right shin comes in front of the left. It's kind of hard to not know which one goes in front this time because we were there so long. So you can shift side to side or maybe lift the hips up a tiny bit. And we'll come right in on this side. So you could play with folding forward or you could play with lying all the way back. So if you lie down, you'll slowly start to recline, coming down onto the forearms, maybe lifting the hips, pushing the glutes forward, coming all the way down onto your back, resting the head. And then finding some ease. So if it's tight, the feet can move farther away from you. You can even bring the knees wider. So don't feel like it needs to be the tightest position with the legs. You're just trying to find a hip opening that works in your body. One where you're not thinking about how long you're going to be here. You can just rest in the pose, allowing it to work through the body. If you're folding forward, try to stay away from your edge so that you have some space to fall deeper into the pose. If you're on your back, reach the arms overhead, finding a bit of a stretch, and then you'll clasp opposite elbows the other way. So bring the other forearm on top. Keep it loose and easy, whatever that is for you. Stay with your breath. And then just be. You're here. And last little bit here, a couple more breaths. Notice where you ended up into the pose. If you're on your back, you can start to stretch the arms back behind you. Bring the forearms back down to the mat. Press into the elbows to lift the head up, and then start to work your way back up onto your hands. We'll all find our way back to seated, and we'll take that reclined seat with the hands back behind us, feet wide to the outer edges of the mat, and then move the knees side to side. And you can start to move the knees so they come closer to the ground when you go side to side with the feet wide, especially now that the hips are more open. It might feel nice to feel that space you're making. In this next pose, we'll come to hands and knees, so all fours. And if you need padding underneath the knees, you can double up the mat. You can bring a blanket or a pillow underneath the knees or a towel, whatever you have. So once you get to hands and knees, bring the big toes together. Sit the hips back. We're coming into child's pose. So as you sit the hips back, walk the hands forward, but you can let the elbows rest down on the mat and the forehead comes down to the mat. So we don't want to feel anything in the knees with child's pose. If your knees are talking to you, that means the hips need to lift up. And you can lift up the hips as high as you need to until the knees are totally quiet. Still staying in the same shape, getting the same benefits. We want that forehead to touch something. So if it's not able to reach the mat, you can always put a block, pillow, blanket, whatever you have. There's that pressure point in the forehead that kicks the relaxation response in. So that's why we want to touch down on something. So hands are heavy, elbows are heavy on the mat. Hips are pulling back toward the heels only if the knees are okay with that, but not a whole lot of effort. So you're still in the hips, but we're going to start to slowly work our way into the upper body. So you might feel a gentle opening happening across the chest, the shoulders, maybe even the upper arms. You'll start to lift the head, look forward, press into the hands enough so that you can lift the elbows away from the mat so the arms are straight. And then you'll take this right arm, you'll thread it through underneath the left arm. So you're making like an L shape with the arms, and then set the side of the head down onto the mat. So right side of the head just rests down onto the mat. Everything else stays the same with your child's pose, the lower body. You're just finding a shoulder opening with the upper body. So my right palm's facing up toward the sky, just sort of reaching away with the fingertips, and those left fingertips are reaching toward the top part of the mat. And then find some ease. See where you can soften. So you're making the pose a little bit more passive and less active. Find your breath if you've lost it. And we'll start to lift the head, bring the right arm forward, and we'll switch sides. So press into the right hand, bring that left arm underneath the right arm, coming down onto the side of the head, left side of the head, resting it down onto the mat. And then once you have the shape, start to soften. Find a little bit more ease, relaxation. Learning that we don't have to put a whole lot of effort to get into different areas in the body. Sometimes just being gentle and staying put for a while makes a bigger difference. You'll press into the right hand to lift the head, bring the left arm forward, and we'll come back to hands and knees. So back to tabletop. So the feet now are hip width distance apart, right behind the knees. And then this time we'll get a little deeper into the upper body. So bring the forearms down to the mat. And then notice where the hips are. So the hips want to come forward ahead of the knees. Just take a moment to make sure the hips are right over the knees. Hug the belly in a tiny bit. Look forward, keeping the lower body right where it is. Walk the elbows forward, and you'll start to feel an opening across the upper body. And now bring the forehead down to the mat. So this is called melting heart pose in yin. We hug the belly in a tiny bit to protect the lower back. We keep the hips right over the knees so we get a deeper opening in the upper body. And then we start to soften. So where can you find an area that doesn't need to work as hard? Send your breath to wherever you need it most in the body. Last couple breaths here. And you'll start to lift the head, walk the elbows in so they're more underneath the shoulders, and then one hand at a time, coming back up to all fours, tabletop. And we'll do a few rounds of cat-cow breath just to get the spine moving. Use that as a counter pose. So on the inhale, reach the heart forward, lift the tail. This shape should feel familiar. And then on the exhale, now we round the whole spine. Chin can come in toward the chest. So that's exact opposite of what we were doing. You probably can feel that. Then inhale forward, find that back bend again. Keep hugging the belly in a little bit for support. And then exhale, round the spine, pushing the mat away from you, pressing into the tops of the feet. Inhale, reach the heart forward, shoulders back away from the ears. Exhale, round. One more cycle. Inhale forward. Exhale, round. Back to a neutral spine tabletop. We'll come into a very similar shoulder opening that we did before. So you'll reach the right arm up and thread this right arm through underneath you, just like we did before. So that left elbow bends, you come down onto the right side of the head, resting it on the mat, and then just rest that right arm onto the mat. So staying in the shoulder a little bit. And you can press into the left hand to roll back. So like the nose is moving away from the mat as you do that. And that gets a little deeper into the upper body. Head's resting. All right, so start to get a little heavier into that left hand. So the nose is coming closer to the mat, and reach that left arm forward, finding that same L shape we did before in child's pose. But now the hips are higher and you're in a different shape with the lower body. You can stay right here, or if you're comfortable with it, you could reach the left arm up toward the sky, turn that left hand to face behind you, and wrap the left arm behind the back. So you're coming into a half bind with that left arm. Don't be too hooked on where the left hand ends up. You're just trying to make some space in the left shoulder, chest. You definitely want to stay away from your edge. So just find a soft place to rest the hand. And if it's feeling like it's too active, the left hand just comes right back down to where it was before. And you'll start to bring that left hand back down in front of the face, wherever it is. So it's on the mat. Press into the left hand to come back up to both hands. You're back to tabletop, all fours. And notice how the spine feels. You might feel a little lopsided. We'll even it out. Left arm reaches up, and you open up the left side chest here. Then you thread the left arm through underneath you, bending that right arm so you can set this side of the head down onto the mat. Press into the right hand to roll the chest open a little bit, just seeing what the space feels like across the shoulder blades, moving the nose away from the mat. Then start to lean back down into the mat. So you're getting softer in that right hand. Nose is coming down closer to the mat than it was before. Reach that right arm straight forward.
finding that L shape, and then soften. See where you can relax. And staying here, or if you want to play with the half bind, you can reach that right arm all the way up to the sky. Turn the right hand to face behind you and wrap the right arm maybe behind the back somewhere where it's easy, gentle, and you're just feeling like you're making good space in that right shoulder. And if at any point you want to, you can bring the right hand back down in front of you and reach it forward over the top of the mat, or keep it down in front of the face. So I want to keep the heart rate steady and not in a place where it's starting to increase. So we want to keep the body cool. Right arm reaches back up if it's behind the back. We'll all bring the right hand down in front of the face. Press into the right hand to come back up onto both hands, and you're back in tabletop. And then from here, just bring the feet over to one side, come to seated on your mat. So getting off the upper body. And then coming to seated on your mat, noticing how the upper body feels. It should feel a little bit more open, a little bit more space. We'll take it all the way down. So come onto your back, soles of the feet still on the mat, resting the head either down on the mat. You could use a pillow underneath the head if you want to. We're going to come into a spinal twist. So hug the right knee in toward the chest, just softly. Notice how the lower back feels. And then play with extending the left leg out in front of you, just resting the heel on the mat. If you feel any tension in the lower back when you do this, then just bring the sole of the left foot back down to the mat, and that's fine. You stay there. If you're okay with the one leg out in front of you, you're going to take this right knee, cross it over the body. So you're going over to the left. And then you need to shimmy onto the outer edge of that left hip. So you're on the side of the hip. Right arm reaches back behind you. It's an easy twist, so not the deepest twist. You're going to be here for a while. You want it to feel good, and you want to be able to just be in the pose without thinking about it. So see where you can soften and take it easy. If you're not doing the one leg, or if it's bothering your lower back, you bring the knees together, and that's a softer way to be in the twist. If the one leg works, stay there. And no goals here other than just finding a twist in your body. So don't worry about the knee being lifted away from the mat, or even the right shoulder away from the mat. But if you're trying to get one down, you're trying to get the shoulder down. And with the eyes closed or softly open, the head can start to fall over to the right, but it doesn't need to go all the way. So see where it naturally wants to be. Leave yourself some room, staying away from your edge, so you have a place to surrender into the pose. We'll start to make our way back to center, slowly bringing the head back to center. Walk that right foot back onto the mat, and then you can press into the right foot to find center on the hips. Walk the left foot in, both knees bent. Bring the knees and the feet together, and then hug the knees in toward the chest. Hang on to each knee with each hand. And then as you keep the knees and the feet together, you're just going to move the knees around in a circle, keeping the knees together. So it's like you're stirring a pot. This is a nice way to counter a longer hold and a twist like we just did. So even though it was a reclined twist, it was a pretty deep pose to be in for that long. You're there for a few minutes. Go the opposite direction with your circles if you were going in the same direction, evening things out. You can feel the hips move on the mat as you do that, or on the ground underneath you. And then you'll set the right foot down onto the mat. Hug that left knee in toward the chest. Notice how the lower back feels. Extend that right leg out in front of you. Let it rest on the mat. And check out the lower back. See if it changed. If it feels the same, stay here. If it doesn't, then bring the sole of the right foot back to the mat, keeping the leg bent. And then you'll do your twist with the knees together. If you feel okay with the one knee, you'll grab onto this knee and bring it over to the right. And you need to lift up a tiny bit so you can get onto the side of the right hip. You want the right foot, right hip, and the head in one line. Left arm reaches back behind you. Gently find your way into the twist. Don't go all the way in. Give your body some room to explore and go deeper on its own. This concept of surrenders, something I've been thinking about this week, how we sometimes work so hard for something and we don't leave a lot of room for things to naturally happen. So finding that confidence to know that we've put the right things in place for what we're working toward. And at a certain point, we just need to let it unfold the way it's going to happen. Still stoking the fire, keeping some effort there, but not trying to force anything. Enjoying the wild ride we're all on. You'll want to come back onto your back. Use the feet to get there Bend both legs, bringing the soles of the feet to the mat. Hug the knees in toward the chest. Same thing we did before. Take some circles with the knees, keeping the knees and the feet together. Going slow so you keep it nice and gentle. Then go the opposite direction. And then we'll come into happy baby. So keep it easy. Open up the knees wide. You can either grab onto the backs of the thighs. Those feet are up though. So you want the feet to be flexed. You can grab the backs of the thighs. Maybe you grab the backs of the calves, pulling the legs down closer. Some of you might be able to get the ankles without lifting the head. So the head stays down and the chest stays open. If the feet are right there, you could grab the inner edges of the feet or the outer edges of the feet, which is the deepest variation. So only if happy baby is really easy. Your hips are really open. So are your shoulders and your upper body. So if it doesn't take much effort to get into a full happy baby, then go for it. Close the eyes. Keep everything on the mat heavy. Instead of curling the hips way up, see if you can bring them down toward the mat a little bit. So we stay in the hips. We want to keep this more of a hip opening. You can rock side to side if that feels gentle and playful without bringing more energy into the body. We want to slow it down. So maybe stillness is better. You decide. Hug the knees in toward the chest. And we'll start to set up for Savasana. So bring the soles of the feet back down to the mat. You can come into a traditional Savasana and just extend the legs out in front of you. If you find that you have any tension in the lower back, then that's when you walk the feet in, bring them out wide, and let the knees touch in the center of the mat. That just brings more space to the lower back. If you're fine with the legs out, keep them there. Another option, you could take a blanket, a pillow, or something underneath the head, a bolster, whatever you have, but you don't have to. If you're fine with the head on the mat, stay there. All you're trying to do is make this pose any better than it already is. Maybe covering the eyes with something if you have something lying around nearby without getting up. And as you come into Shavasana, feeling how different the body is now compared to when you first started. Hopefully, it feels like everything's kind of buzzing with the practice, the poses. Hopefully, you feel more connected. Not only to the body, but also the mind and spirit. You can let go of the breath control. Just go back to letting the body breathe on its own. And if you feel like you're holding yourself anywhere, if there's any effort left, see if you can let that go. Making some space in the forehead like we started, between the eyebrows. Letting the jaw become heavy. Still keeping the mouth closed. Hands and feet are totally relaxed. The fingers just curl naturally. Toes turn out. you'll start to find some movement in the hands and the feet, wiggling the fingers and the toes. Then stretch the arms overhead, getting really long on your mat, feeling all that space you made in the body. Start to walk the feet in, bending the legs. And you'll roll over onto your right side. So cradle the head and the arm. Keep the eyes closed if you can. Lying in the fetal position, taking our time, coming back into our day, into our bodies, back into our life. Use the left hand to press yourself up to seated, and you'll just come to an easy cross-legged seat. So this practice is built for meditation. We need to find some movement before we can become still. So sitting up as tall as you can, pressing down into the sit bones, shoulders away from the ears, finding that length all the way up through the crown of the head. Bringing the hands together in front of you. So left side of the body meets the right side of the body. Then we take a moment, maintaining the lift of the chest, to bow the head slightly to honor and acknowledge your heart and your spirit. What makes you, you, as well as everyone around you. Bring the head back up, blink open the eyes. Namaste. Thank you so much for joining live or doing the recording. I hope you feel great and experience the benefits of yin all day long, maybe even tomorrow. We'll be doing this class every Tuesday at 8:30. And if you can't make it live, I'll always post the recording on YouTube. Thank you.